Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 311 of Optimal Living Advice. I'm Greg Audino, so glad to have you here once again today. I am back to answer another question from one of your fellow listeners, and I'm excited today because it is one of those questions that I think will pull everyone in and that everyone will be able to relate to pretty easily. So do listen closely, especially if you struggle with the idea of regret, or if regret means a lot to you for whatever reason. That's definitely going to be the focal point here today. So let's jump right in and start optimizing your life. One of my biggest goals right now is to live a life free of regrets. I've always held on to regrets too tightly, criticizing myself years later for even small decisions that I feel I could have made differently. The more I look back, the more I see that these are the only demons that really follow me. So is it even possible to live a life free of regret? What can I do now? And how can I even know what my later self will regret? You and me both. Very good question, asker. Thank you for sending this one in. It almost seems like the only question worth asking, doesn't it? All-encompassing, cutting to the core of what we're trying to accomplish in this life, and both understanding and maximizing how much of it we can control. It is the right question, but it comes with an awful lot of pressure, doesn't it? And I think it's that very pressure that makes the question unsolvable, or at least forces us to make the answer about our perception of regret, as opposed to what we imagine now to be the absence of regret. And because of that, I would encourage you to start rethinking regret more than anything else. It seems to me like right now your priority is the banishing of regret. That's your goal, living a mistake-free life, or at least a life consisting of mistakes that you can forgive yourself for, which seem to be few and far between based on how you described everything. So first, I would encourage you to self-reflect or reflect with a counselor on what your relationship with self-forgiveness is like. Second, I would like to remind you that oftentimes, whether or not we label a choice as a mistake is really based largely on outcomes that reveal themselves far down the road and are usually due only in part to our decisions, along with plenty of other contributing factors that are out of our hands. And third, know that while you're trying to live a mistake-free life and putting that goal front and center, it could very well be taking away from your ability to live presently, and therefore intruding on some other very important parts of life that you care about approaching the right way, like your family life, social life, spiritual life, or cultivating a meaningful work life. Now, it should be said that that list of items is really just based on educated guesses. It's very difficult to know what we'll prioritize down the road and thus base our regrets on. And ultimately, our regrets are always limited to our awareness. Contrary to what I used to believe and probably mentioned in the earlier days of this show, it's not like we're all struck with this great neutralizing wisdom once we're on our deathbeds in our old age and breathing our last breaths. Our priorities usually become much clearer in this time or in the face of other tragedies. And, those priorities are often based on items such as the ones that I listed off. But it's not like we all die as extraordinarily well-aligned and mentally healthy versions of ourselves. Not everybody. So with that being said, I think that what this all comes down to is to switch the focus towards being intentional instead of being right. You're shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to live a life free of regret and basing your regrets solely on good outcomes. Hopefully, you're going to keep growing. That's my hope for all of us. And that means looking back and cringing at some of our decisions, right? But ultimately, showing compassion to the younger versions of ourselves that made those decisions, rather than condemning the past and condemning the present versions of ourselves. In order to shift into this mindset, focus on what your values are now, and if you think they'll remain valuable to you. Again, making your best guesses. If so, make decisions based on those values, knowing that you really considered it and you put your best foot forward, and leaving it at that. if you consider your priorities and you get to thinking that they might only be valuable for a short time, however, you can still allow yourself to indulge in these things right now, but consider if your commitments to them are so strong that they may interfere with what's really going to matter to you, again, based on your best guesses. Or, you might assume that these values will be really far off what your future self will want, that you might consider abandoning them altogether. That might seem a little confusing, sorry about that, so I'll provide an example. So say you're really into restoring or buying classic cars. Say it's a new hobby of yours, you're enjoying it. You might think about this pastime that currently plays a big part in your life and come to the conclusion that, no, you likely won't be thinking much about your car collection down the road when you're really taking stock of what matters in life. It won't be one of the main pillars of your life. This would not mean that you have to stop enjoying this hobby and remove it from your life. It's okay to enjoy things for a time, even if we think they won't last. The real question is whether or not this is damaging to what is currently or what we strongly believe will be a greater personal cause in the future. So maybe your car hobby needs to take a step back if you're spending all of your money on them and not saving any for your retirement or your kids' college tuition if you want to pay to put your kids through college. Maybe you're spending all of your time on cars and not with your family. So if you have a family that you want to spend time with and you have more important things to put large sums of money towards in the future, then, in that case, an obsessive car habit puts those things at risk. It lends itself to regret. But asking now, even though you don't know exactly what the future holds, still helps you to consider a greater perspective and tend to all of the parts of your life that seem important now or then. You can adjust things based on future projections, and you can still simply enjoy your classic cars in moderation rather than forcing yourself away from them. So ultimately, what the point is you can only mature so fast or be so wise beyond your years, but what you can do at any age is be mindful and conscious of how you're living. You might not have all the answers, but you'll at least have effort. And knowing that you put forth the effort will definitely absolve you of a lot of potential regret. And thank you to the asker for providing a question that I'm sure got us all wondering. I really appreciate universal questions like these that encourage us to all think a bit deeper rather than just tuning in for the drama. I'm hoping that both the asker and all of you got what you needed from this one, realizing that much of this does start with the ability to forgive oneself and love oneself, which are amazing focal points for anyone, regardless of where they're at in their journey towards personal development. Now, if you have a question of your own that you'd like to send in, please do so by emailing me at advice@oldpodcast.com, advice@oldpodcast.com. I'd be thrilled to hear from you. You will definitely hear back from me, and nothing is off limits, so don't be shy. That is going to do it for another episode of Optimal Living Advice, though. As always, I thank you for tuning in and making another episode possible, and please do consider coming on back for more when we pick up again with our next episode on Friday. That's where your optimal life awaits.